So thank you all. If you were here just a little bit earlier, I was thanking everyone specifically for joining us in this wonderful weather that we're having in DC. And of course, if we have people joining elsewhere, I'm hoping you have, although I'm thinking most of the people are in this area or Detroit. So most of you know me. I'm Jamie Ann, the director of the James Renwick Alliance. I think there's a few people who might not. So I said James Renwick Alliance, but I got to get with the times because we are now the James Renwick Alliance for Craft. So if you haven't heard the news, we added for Craft to our title to better represent our mission and the work that we do, which is really to support and encourage connoisseurship, public appreciation, and education about American craft. So we do this through a whole bunch of wonderful ways, including trips, programs, and recognition of artists, both from emerging to established. And this is one of the programs that we originally offered at our craft weekend back in October. So if you were with us at Craft Weekend, you had the opportunity to sign up for this program early, and then we opened it up to everyone else. So with that, I'm absolutely thankful to Pewabic for agreeing to do this program today. I think we're really in for a treat. Something some of you guys might not know is that one of my very dearest friends works at Pewabic, so I'm glad that I was able to see her, and she'll be helping in the chat box. Her name is Amanda. I almost said her former name, Rogers. And also Emily Schimmel, our office manager, will also be in the chat helping answer questions. And you can put all of your questions there. We'll be having a Q&A at the end. So Steve, I'm gonna invite you to join us and tell us a little bit about Pewabic. Steve McBride is the executive director of Pewabic. And Steve, just make sure you take yourself off of mute.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to provide, again, I'm Steve McBride. I'm the executive director of Pewabic Pottery. I'm going to provide just a little background for anybody that's not as familiar with Pewabic, give you a kind of quick run through of our history, and then I'm going to turn it over to Genevieve Sylvia, one of our senior designers, who will talk a little bit more about our design process. So for those that don't know, Pewabic was founded in 1903 in Detroit. Just to put that in context, that's the same year that Ford Motor Company was founded. We were founded by two individuals. The artistic driving force was Mary Chase Perry Stratton, who was born in Hancock in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and then moved down to Southeast Michigan as a child. And she became prominent as primarily, well, initially anyway, as a china painter. So that's, painting overglazed enamels on pre-fired commercial porcelain. And she was well known, wrote about it, did workshops. Her partner in crime was Horace Calkins, who was a businessman who had a dental supply company. And one of the things that he developed was a line of kilns called the Revelation kilns that he used to fire, or he sold for dentists to fire porcelain teeth, fake teeth. He found out that his neighbor was using one of his Revelation kilns to fire her china painting, and he thought, hey, there's a great business opportunity. So he hired Mary to travel around the country selling these Revelation kilns to potters and china painters and other ceramic artists. She did successfully, and as she was doing that, she she trained herself a lot because she learned a lot more from talking to potters and other ceramic artists. And by then she was getting bored with china painting, and she came back and she said, Horace, you want to go into business? And Horace said, sure. So they opened a pottery. This was the first pottery was started in 1903 in Brush Park in a carriage house behind a mansion in Detroit's downtown area. And here's a shot of the gallery space, second floor retail space of what we call the stable studio. And here's a shot just of one of the early day books where to kind of record the daily transactions. And so what's kind of fun is, she would do little thumbnail sketches or descriptions. So a lot of times when we're going to try to identify and date some historic work, we can actually go back, pull up the day books, find the specific pots and date them that way. Quickly outgrew that space and had the current pottery built in 1907. It was built by William Buck Stratton, a prominent architect of the time who would later marry Mary. And it was built over on the east side of Detroit, kind of on the river. Here's a shot inside the studio from the 19-teens, around 1910. Here's a shot of this is actually the room that I'm in right now upstairs, which was the original like retail showroom for the pottery. So this was again about 1910. And Pewabic first really rose to prominence because of our iridescent glaze. It was a kind of a feature glaze that Mary developed that really brought recognition to Pewabic. And to this day, it's really still the hallmark of Pewabic pottery. Working with architects, there was a lot of interest at the time. They wanted to start using kind of handcrafted architectural tile, and that required kind of an addition. So in 1912, they added on a kind of area, the two-story area in the back of the pottery, and that houses our clay mixer. So this is actually a shot of the clay mixer that we still use today. It was installed in 1912. It's built right into the building. So there's a vat under the floor. So this round vat there's where we mix the dry ingredients to make the clay. It's mixed into a liquid slip and goes underground into this big vat, and then we pump it up into our filter press to actually create the clay that we still use for all of our tile today. Here's a shot of a couple of artisans pressing tiles, from the teens. One of the first major architectural jobs was the Cathedral Church of St. Paul here in Detroit. That was about 1910. Here's some shots of that installation. And churches became like, kind of a major hallmark of Pewabic. This is one of my favorite installations. This is Sacred Heart Major Seminary here in Detroit. It's probably the largest installation of Pewabic tile in this region. It covers the entire seminary. And you can see the altar floor there. Here's a detail of that. It's just spectacular tile work, and they've kept it pristine. That was built just about 100 years ago. Of course, our largest installation to date is still in Washington, D.C. It's the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And that's Pewabic tiled the domes of the crypt church. And so that was started in the mid-20s and took 7 years to complete. And Mary actually she traveled to the catacombs in Rome to do some research and study, Christian iconography that was incorporated in that. Again, it took like 7 years to produce. Here's a shot on the left, is shot from inside our tile studio. The dove there is one of the medallions for a centerpiece of one of the crypt domes, and then you can see installation on the right. Here's just a couple of details of some tile work from the ceiling. And of course, all over Detroit. So we like to say we're part of the fabric of the city. And so you travel around. This is a shot of the Guardian Building, which is Detroit's Art Deco Cathedral of Finance. This opened in 1929, just in time for the Great Depression. This is the Detroit Institute of Arts. So you can see Pewabic kind of throughout the DIA. There's a couple of fountains, there are medallions in the floor, these iridescent tile niches. Across from the DIA is the Detroit Public Library. There's a shot of the front of the library. And on that second floor balcony, there's a loggia with 7 bays that are all mosaic tile. And each bay is one of the 7 stages of man from Shakespeare's As You Like It. There's kind of a detail of that. And so, we've always worked really closely with architects and designers. This is Eliel Saarinen, designed some tile to create a fireplace. This is a Saarinen house at Cranbrook, but it was originally created for the exhibition of contemporary American design at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1929, and then later donated to Cranbrook. Here's a shot of Mary working on the Rainbow Fountain, another installation at Cranbrook. I love the settings. That we have some photos of her, in full garb, doing kilns and laying tiles. Mary ran the pottery up until her death at the age of 94 in 1961. At that point, her assistant, Ella Peters, kept it going for about 5 years and then donated it to Michigan State University. MSU ran it for about 15 years, but it was hemorrhaging money and they were going to shut it down. And a group of volunteers got together to raise money. With their goal was to raise money to keep, to donate money to MSU so that they would keep the pottery going. But I always compare it to the dog that catches the car, because MSU said, oh, well, you want it here, you can have it. So the Pewabic Society Incorporated took ownership of the pottery in 1981. So we're celebrating 40 years this year as a nonprofit. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit. And one of the first major jobs as a nonprofit was the Detroit People Mover. So the mid 80s, we ended doing kind of major mural installations in 5 of the People Mover stations. This one's Cadillac Station, which is my favorite. And we've continued to do that same thing, throughout Detroit. So this is Comerica Park, major installation in around 2000. Here are a couple of our artisans working on some tile for Little Caesars Arena that just opened in 2018. As you can see, the tile goes up the columns on the front of that. We also do, lots of smaller projects, little art murals and things. Here's one of Plymouth District Library that we did a few years ago. And we do, lots of contemporary architectural tile installations, work with architects and designers and homeowners. And then still, about half of our revenue comes from our art tile and pottery vases and things that we sell through our store. So this is our retail store, the front of the pottery. And then we also, in addition to the work that we make ourselves, we feature work from artists from all across North America. So when you come, you can tour galleries and you can see work by more than 60 different ceramic artists that we sell here. Some of them are actually artisans that make our work and then do their own work on the side as well. This is one of our historic galleries, where you can see some of the history. You can see one of the original Revelation kilns. That dove on the wall is a second from the National Shrine, because what we do, and the same thing that we do today is, when we're doing projects, we'll frequently make extras in case it gets damaged in shipping or some flaw happens, and then these were later installed around the pottery. Here's a shot of our Stratton Gallery that just has some old historic pots dating back to the early 1900s. That orange one that you can see in the background there, the colorant in that is uranium, which I love. It's right outside my office though, so I'm not sure I should really love the uranium part. We also have an education studio right here on site, on the second floor of the pottery, where we teach classes in wheel throwing, hand building, tile. This is a shot of our street team. So a few years ago, we got a grant from the Night Arts Challenge Detroit to kind of take the pottery on the road, knowing that not everybody can make it down here. So we created this turned a Ford Transit van into a mobile museum and built a couple of portable kilns, so we can do pop-up events all over the city. So we'll take that and we'll do work at schools. Here's just a shot of the raku pots that we fire in those kilns and give away to everybody that comes to check out the events. We also, this is a shot of our courtyard. So a few years ago, we got a grant from New York's Project for Public Spaces to do a little placemaking in our courtyard. So this gives people a place to hang out, when they're shopping, or we use it for events. At least pre-COVID, we used it for events, and hopefully post-COVID, we'll use it for events again. This is a shot where during our annual garden party, where we turned the courtyard into a beer garden with live music playing on our kiln pad. That's where we have our education kilns. And then we're always, trying to it's been, there's been a lot of support for Pewabic, a lot of demand for what we do. And so we added on a 2,500 square foot addition to our tile studios. This is the back of the pottery. We just opened this in 2019, started using it just in time to, this is outside of the tile studio. Had we not had this space, additional 2,500 square foot, we'd have been like dead in the water during COVID, because there's just no way we could have been able to like keep working and maintain safe social distancing. But it also gave us an additional like flat roof that we could install some solar panels. So we're as an organization that's 118 years old, we're constantly thinking about sustainability. This is a shot in a few years ago in 2018. We took our street team to Pittsburgh to do some demonstrations for the annual conference of NCECA, the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts. And we were kind of reviewing the photos, and there's running one of our street team raku firings on the right, kind of like, it was pretty reminiscent of Mary pulling a pot from one of the kilns early on in the pottery. And it really struck us that it's like, we're rediscovering some of kind of the original motivation. The street team was really to like make this accessible to everybody so that we could take it onto the road into communities and neighborhoods. And part of the Revelation kiln, the revelation behind that was that it was a kiln that was accessible, and potters could actually own those and have them in their homes. And so I got me just pulling up some other images. Here's a shot of Mary decorating a pot from the 20s, and our master mold maker Sherilyn on the right, working on a pot much more recently. That's a shot of, this is our snowdrop vase. It's one of our heritage collections. So this is, we still keep some designs that date back, but we're constantly developing new work. Here's a shot of Joseph Herrick, who was the first production potter at the pottery, throwing a pot in the 1920s, and our current head potter, Andrew Cale, throwing a pot last year, just 100 years apart. Just remarkable similarity. This is Joseph Ender, again from the 1920s, loading a kiln, and our current kiln room supervisor, Brett Gray, loading a kiln this year. I know like archivists will have an easy time dating the 1920 or the 2020 when they look at photos. This is Alexis Laptev, was a sculptor that worked at the pottery in the 1930s, and one of our current designers sculpting a nativity tile on the right. That's Chris Mays. And of course, glaze is still like the hallmark of what we do. Here's our head glaze development specialist, Alex, spraying a pot. But we're constantly, still working and developing new glazes all the time. Here's a shot of iridescent. This is an old historic iridescent tile, and this is current iridescent palette. This is just one iridescent glaze, just kind of showing the range of what you get. One of the things, the nice thing about the iridescent finish is it's really variable and kind of takes on different looks. Here are a few different current vases that we sell with iridescent glaze. We just released a new iridescent this holiday. We were kind of reviewing some samples there and landed on the copper glaze that we just released this holiday season, which was flying out the shelves. We couldn't keep this in stock. Every time we'd unload a kiln, we put them on the website and they'd sell out immediately. It's remarkable like how, this pottery now has been going on in this same location since 1907. And though, we're a contemporary working pottery, we still share kind of that, initial motivation, which is behind the arts and crafts movement of, arts for everybody in craft. We want everybody to have have their lives enriched by craft. And so it's, all about like the artisans that work here that keep that spirit alive. Here's a shot of some of our artisans today. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm going to hand off the presentation to Genevieve. Genevieve's a senior designer here, and so she can give you a little bit more detail on how we make our work today and kind of the inspiration behind our design process.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a moment here and share my screen. Let me get things rolling. So I want to welcome everyone. You're seeing me here from our showroom space here in Detroit. We were very fortunate to have this space renovated pre-COVID. It really allowed us to visually, we had photographs to share with folks, and we were really able to continue our work during a period of time when so many organizations and arts organizations were closed. We were able to continue our work with clients and customers and bringing them through the showroom virtually. So when you come into the showroom, you'd be greeted with the fireplace. This is our Celtic fireplace, we call it. And it was really created to kind of depict the variety of details and embellishments that people might want to think about or consider, you know, for their own home project. So it was important to us, you know, that we reflect kind of a wood mantle. This is actually a reclaimed wood mantle that's made by a local source, and features some of the hallmark colors like these greens, the iridescent trims, and things of that nature. But when you talk to customers about really what they think about and what comes to mind when they hear Pewabic, they really are thinking about the shapes and patterns that they might have seen historically or even in today's installations. And of course, it's color, it's palette. I mean, people, I think of late, there's a trend, of course, for neutrals and whites, but really people are coming here for color. They're coming here for those hallmark iridescents, those teals, those blues. And I think that it's eternally classic, and we are always representing, you know, the origins of our palette, but maybe combining it with profiles that might feel a little updated with neutral tones or grays. So on some of the tile boards we're seeing here, you know, there's the classic 3x6 subway in kind of a neutral gray, but next to it is also a subway pattern, but in a 2x6 accented with 2x2 iridescence, and, you know, goes on hexes and the fish scale and half hexes there that are accented with a white grout. So all of these things really make up the full collection of Pewabic. So I think Steve touched on a little bit earlier about who our customers are, and certainly it's homeowners, but it's homeowners, it's architects, it's their interior designers. We work with people who might be coming in alone, just bringing us kind of simple dimension drawings like this. They might be companioned with their interior designer or maybe with their architect as well. So we take these basic dimensions and really pretty rudimentary sketches, turn that into a digital rendering. So we're meeting with them. We're trying to really kind of absorb in that meeting what aesthetic they're going for. Here you're seeing the heritage pattern in a very kind of, I would say, indicative Pewabic blue, accented with some key embossed pieces that for this particular homeowner was important, the dragonfly and the butterfly, and then the layering of the trim and details around the firebox. So from digital rendering to the finished piece in their home. I loved this little photograph with the dog down in the corner, and we have people that really want to live with this material, and she sent me this email that was just like, I love this tile, you know, this color. And we went through a lot of iterations for her in palette, from something that was, you know, a little more multicolored, but ended up being this kind of monochromatic. And when you've got this heritage pattern where you're seeing all these different profiles, I think sometimes you're reading that pattern better when you tone it down in a monochromatic field. So our effort through the design team when we're meeting with customers is to create kind of a mapping of the project. So the drawing you're seeing on the left is what we would call our maker's map. So it's really going to serve a purpose for our artisans here on the fabrication team to make your work, but it's also serving as the map for your installer. We'll talk a little bit more about installation later. The drawing on the left is a digital color rendering map. So installer knows exactly where to place everything, and not to be, intimidated by the fact that, of course, we're always here to answer some of those end questions. So we've gone from digital rendering, black and white maker's map, to a color rendering. Now we're at the point where we're laying the work out on the floor, kind of for a quality control and this kind of final fit, and then to the end result in people's homes. So we have here that hallmark iridescent, accented with this teal and blues, those 2x2 embossed embellishments that I think people see and really recognize as signature Pewabic pieces. And this particular customer also wanted to kind of depart from maybe a more traditional wooden mantle and use a ceramic mantle. And we're seeing a lot more of that. People who really want to kind of have the whole piece be a ceramic kind of experience on their fireplace. But really, where does all of this kind of start? And Steve showed you earlier shots of this clay making area, and this is it today. This is what we're using today to make our clay ingredients. Those dry ingredients are mined from around the country. They come from Kentucky, from Tennessee, and all of those things come to us in dry form. Seamus here is introducing them into this large vat that you introduce and measure all of these recipe for our clay body. Then you introduce the water and it becomes a liquid or slip form at that point, and it's coming through that filter press, which is still being used today, a historical or original piece of equipment that we have Brett here taking the clay out of. Once the clay is made for a project and you've got your drawings, you have your color renderings, we know what we're making for you. We start pulling out molds and prepping counts and kind of itemizing the pieces that are going to make up your project. So if you've got mold making that's needed, we have Sherilyn, who's been with us for 30+ years, who is our master mold maker. She's going to make any new molds that are necessary. Ricky is going to, and a variety of people are going to be pressing these pieces. You'll see Ricky here, he's hand pressing tile. But for larger quantities, let's say it's an arena project, a stadium, we're going to be not only hand pressing these in plaster molds, but we might be using our ram press. And this is a piece of equipment that really has allowed our team to stay safe. It's a matter of kind of not overusing their bodies. It's a laborious process. And Kevin here is using the filter press so that we can make multiples of these field tile at a time. I think when you're also looking at a Pewabic project, you're seeing the details that are in your work and in the intended finished state. And so we're looking at one of our makers here cutting templates. You're seeing that level of detail that's being really handled throughout the whole process. Once the tile are fabricated, they're going through kilns and firings. Multiple kilns are here at the pottery, gas environments. We really like to have a gas environment for what I think is the best result of our glaze combinations, or the result of our glazes. You get an inherent amount of kind of impurities and irregularities from the top of the kiln to the bottom of the kiln. And that's really what you want. You want that kind of variety and variation that becomes recognizable as Pewabic. And Alex here is our kind of glaze chef. He's making and mixing glazes here and developing glazes for us. But as those projects are coming in, we're making those glazes. We're taking those recipes that are property of Pewabic, mixing those glazes, making sure that those results are going to be consistent with what the customer's expectation is, what our expectation is, and moving it through the kiln room or the glaze room. Jose here is hand glazing work. And it really, through the whole process of making projects and architectural projects, between the design team and the makers, there's just constant kind of conversation and touching base about, the details of how this project is intended to, the end result of this project. So there's a lot of conversation that really continues from the beginning until the very end. Lexi and Jose glazing. Lexi here on the left is hand glazing the leaf and berry embossed piece. And what you'll see here is a gathering of all of these parts. So we've cut all of our templates, we fabricated all the pieces, we've gotten our digital rendering in front of us here, and it's time to really start putting these things together. And we have kilns, glaze kilns that are going in, Chris here, and firings are fired at about 2,300 degrees. So this makes it a very durable, very vitreous body that's clay body and glazed surface, I should add, that is applicable for floors, walls, wet installations, outdoor installations, certainly in environments like California and warm temperate environments, outdoor applications are appropriate. In locations like maybe DC or Detroit and Michigan, semi-sheltered environments are definitely suggested, and certainly vertical surfaces would be appropriate. We have a lot of kind of fountain work and things like that that you can find outside. So as these pieces start coming out of kilns, they begin this laying out of the work that is our chance to quality control the installation before it reaches the customer. It allows us to guarantee that the glaze results are accurate, that all the pieces are present, and that really most importantly, the fit is there. And it continues with this laying out that once these pieces are there and they're in their entirety, we photograph it, and this starts really letting us kind of indicate to the customer that the work is done. And I joke that we use this kiln room floor more like a desk than we do a walking surface. Chris here, one of our design team members, is doing an inspection, final inspection here of a fireplace that had crossed through our fabrication area during this period of COVID. We continue to make project after project. I think people were certainly in their homes, experiencing their homes in a way that maybe they hadn't before. And really, it was time to focus on some of these areas. And what better areas that in your home are you spending a lot of time sitting in front of is a fireplace. And there's a variety of places we spend our time, but certainly I know in the last year I spent a lot of time in my family room, a lot of time in front of my fireplace. So we'll go through some of the finished shots of some installations. This is a really sweet kind of whimsical representation of a blend of our Corktown blend. We have, if you go to our website, and we'll share that website address later on, you'll see that there's some more kind of do-it-yourself lines, things that we've tried to think through for people to kind of answer maybe some of their fears about putting colors together and what works and what doesn't. And this particular customer had a backsplash already, was waiting for this fireplace, and it's a space that gets a lot of natural light. They wanted a little bit of kind of this Art Deco kind of detailing across the header and some natural kind of organic imagery in there. And you'll see upon their mantle there, they're already a collector of pieces. So this was just a really lovely, bright, kind of whimsical fireplace that we created. Now, this is a nice combination of a very traditional green kind of glaze, what people might recognize as Pewabic green. And we really tried to freshen it up with a staggered bond, but on a horizontal. So taking some of our standard pieces and creating a little bit of a different grid pattern. And also, the layering of the trim that we created around the firebox. So I think that you hear people maybe a little bit afraid of, you know, what's too much, what's too little, and don't miss those opportunities to layer the trims. And we've got a brown geometric trim here that was originally an Iridescent trim. You would find that at Cranbrook, layered with the iridescent. And so I think that whether you're in kind of a eternally very traditional or classic home, you'll see this nice kind of detailing around the arch, or maybe a transitional environment, or maybe a very kind of regional feeling home that you're in. This feels very kind of Southwest. The material really translates from a wide variety of architectural aesthetics to something very modern. This was a great kind of challenge to use something that, you know, we've got a subway pattern here. It's a 4x8. So we did a little bit of a change on the scale of a subway, which you would normally think is a 3x6. We laid it on a vertical rather than what you would normally think of a subway pattern on a horizontal. And we're going to have a lot of natural light in this space, a very modern environment, accented with these kind of almost like Crayola-like color accents. But we had the special challenge of, you know, the firebox was a fixed dimension, and we needed to create these kind of spacers that were going to make up that dimension. So we used that really as an opportunity to create and enhance this kind of vertical feel on the fireplace, pulling in the accent color of this kind of gunmetal gray. And I just think it's a really super wonderful, you know, it's washed in light. There's a water view outside as well as green. So you're getting these great like water tones and greens from this fireplace. And again, more customers who are not afraid of color. And as interesting and as the space is with this rich blue and these gold kind of accents, this particular client had this kind of denim desire and rich blues that were going to be accented with iridescent. But it was important to them because this was a new home for them. In their previous home, they had been living with this comedy and tragedy that they had installed in their home, but they couldn't take it with them. So, you know, the challenge was, we have to have comedy and tragedy with this home, you know, in this next installation. And I think that's just a testimony to the passion that people feel about this material. And once you've lived with it, you just want it. You want more of it. You want to bring it with you if you can. And if you can't, you're going to install it again and kind of mimic what you love. And so I think that's the beauty of this material, is the passion that people feel about it. Now, I'm sharing this installation. I don't have finished architectural installation shots, but this was a very large project that we finished during COVID. We made during this period when so many people were shut down, and we had such a great team of makers who we were rotating in so that we were following all the protocols. And you'll see, and I don't know that you can see it well, but they're masked in this picture. But here's a great show of this herringbone pattern. It's a 3x6 herringbone, you know, kind of anchored in on the sides with 3x3s in a family of iridescent, layered with trims, and you'll get a sense of the scale in this picture. So this is its final modest resting place, looking over the water, the river. And it's a palm house. So you're going to have 20-foot, 30-foot palm trees. The palm house is mimicked after Balboa Park. She's a native Californian. And so it was important for the palette to really reflect the greens and the colors that were going to be going on in the interior with the palm trees and the patinaed columns, but also the water. So those iridescents are really feeling and picking up that water. But this really brings me to the importance of installation. You know, I mean, that is to me the final frontier of any good finished material, you know, product or tile installation is the installer. And you can have a project that should be absolutely stunning. And if you are not kind of picking an installer that has a sensitivity to a handmade material or has some aesthetic sensitivity, you might not end up with the best installation. But you can have a really basic 4x4 field that's pretty simple, just a nice blend of blues or greens or iridescent, and installs really well, and it is gorgeous and stunning. So I think that there is a lot of forgiveness in this material in its installation because it's handmade. You get variation in the grout, but it's important to make sure that your installer has a sensitivity to a handmade material. Certainly Pewabic team is going to be available if they have questions, if the installer has questions or if the client has questions, but we won't be there to kind of handhold. So those are the people who you need to trust that are making the right aesthetic decisions. Sometimes there's something that's an inch off, and those are the ones that are on site. They're kind of, you know, hands on the ground. They're the ones doing it. You want to have confidence in those individuals. So outside of fireplaces, the other place, of course, that we're all gathering, and have spent an enormous amount of time this year, is in my kitchen. And I think as we get back to entertaining, we do find that that's where everyone's hovering, that's where everyone's hanging out. And this is a great little kind of neutral background. It's in a traditional contemporary or a traditional environment, but with this white hex and these white staggered bond grid, it really kind of feels updated and modern. Here we have Neil laying out this backsplash. It's kind of a basket weave. It had a companion fireplace that was a Frank Lloyd Wright fireplace, and this was being tied into that fireplace through color, but we didn't want to mimic something that was going to be just kind of reflecting exactly the fireplace. So we did this through color. Here's a good show of how we use our floor as like a drafting board. You're seeing all these tape lines of previous jobs and works that have been laid out. A great little border there. You know, people, you can see in the details there, there's some embossed pieces, but they're pretty subtle. And that's a way you can kind of embellish or include some of those embossed kind of Pewabic identifiers, but make it in a more subtle way by just making them kind of monochromatic. Here's a little working shot of the backsplash. And then, you know, there certainly is a neutral push these days. We had this client who had a white kitchen. It was important for her to keep the space kind of neutral. And we took a traditional subway idea, converted it to a 2x6, ran it as a herringbone behind the stove back, and you'll see there's a little border breaking the herringbone in the subway. Well, you need to do that from an aesthetic perspective, because it's where you're lining up one pattern and another pattern. You need to kind of minimize that awkwardness in the joint. Here's something that was inspired by the Guardian building. You saw a photo of the Guardian building earlier. It's a very vibrantly colored, but we kind of created a more neutral background. And it's juxtaposed with a commercial tile, actually, this installation. Fun detail in this is just a white blend, but they really punched it up with using black grout, which I think initially was kind of a little bit of a, ooh, I don't know if we should do this or not. But for this environment, they've got black detailing. They have this Frank Lloyd Wright kind of graphic in their stove back, and it just really helps the whole piece read as this kind of graphic installation. And I wouldn't want to kind of close out without representing our iridescent. I think sometimes when people are choosing an iridescent glaze, that's really all you need to do. There's such a wide range of color and variety. We created a little bit of an anchor at the base there up against the countertop, and you just ran your iridescent field on the bias. So whether you have a large installation of 30 square feet or you've got something that's 5 square feet, a little bit really goes a long way. This is just a beautiful little iridescent accent that's, you know, up against this brick, and it feels kind of urban. It's just a beautiful combination. Bathrooms. Bathrooms are our next place of luxury, right? This was a installation with a very neutral white marble. They wanted to add a little bit of warmth, but in this shot here, you're seeing that level of detail. You know, we need to know how all these transitions are working in the corners, and we really work with our team to do that for you. Ginkgo shower surround. My favorite part actually of this, the ginkgo is certainly beautiful, but it's just the green blend at the bottom and how we've transitioned from the 6x6s and then migrated up to 3x6s with the 6x6s, and then that soldier course of 3x6s. And whether you have a big bathroom like we have on the left here that's overlooking New York Central Park, this was a Jed Johnson bathroom that was included. It's been in New York Times, it's been in Architectural Digest. A customer came to us and they were inspired by this bathroom, but they didn't have the natural light, they didn't have the scale. And so we were trying to figure out how do we, you know, how do we make this feel the same? So we just flipped palette. They didn't have that natural light. We made it a nice white background, included some of the border details in that green. And we have this really kind of quirky bathroom. It's called the Dragon Bathroom. We took our traditional fish scale tile and in this kind of family of blues, and there were some iridescence picked up in there. His whole bathroom, we turned this fish scale. You can use it in a variety of orientations, but in this orientation, it felt like a scale. It's intended to reflect the dragon scale. And then the handmade screened sink, not Pewabic, from some other unique supplier for this person's bathroom. And you know, I think an important part of what we do certainly is all of the interior architectural pieces and fireplace and backsplashes. They're enhancing people's kind of personal lives, but there's all the public spaces. And this is a St. John's Birthing Center. This is a lot of mural work comes down our, you know, through our fabrication team. And this was an individual donor. So we might have donor walls that have individual donors or a variety of people who are donating. And this was at the St. John's Birthing Center. And this is the sweet little like detail shot. I love looking at it because every time I look at it, I find something different. The little nest that's there that has like 3 eggs. There's a little baby pig. There's a gecko, a little like salamander. It just, I think in the field around it, there's like a baby duck, a mama duck and baby duck, and a little ladybug there. So this is one of the more custom mural projects, certainly. Plymouth District Library, also funded by a group of donors. And it was, the challenge here was, you know, we have the village of Plymouth, but we also have the township. So we had it was important to include both the rural part of the community and the city. And so what we did was we took some iconic architectural details from the city, like the library and the clock tower, and place that in the mural, but above more of the kind of greenscape and the farmlands. But we tied it together with the railroad detailing on the right, because the Plymouth, Township of Plymouth has a really big kind of railroad that runs through the center of town. And this is what's really tying the two country and the town together. Here we have a kind of Escher-like fountain that transitions from hexes to diamond shapes up to these more organic butterflies at the very top. And seeing the DIA fountain again on the right, the original fountain. We had a client come in who's across from Cranbrook, and there's an exterior opportunity. She wanted to create a fountain, and she wanted to know, can I get something that feels and is representative of that DIA fountain? And so we kind of recreated something that certainly has a new palette and has some differences, but really reflects that original installation. This is a children's hospital, outpatient hospital. These trees, it's a 90-foot wall, 10-foot ceiling. This was a really unique opportunity that included staff and patients who could come through and were making some of these rondelles that were up on the ceiling or on the wall there, and they were going to be then brought back to the pottery glaze and included in the installation. So patients and children who are coming back are looking for their tile. Sparrow installation. Now this is a really great and nice showing of how to take just standard parts, 6x6s, diamond shapes, 4x4s, and create this really magnificent, I would just say impactful installation simply by organizing our standard field tile in this great array of blue to greens and, you know, highlighted with iridescent. And I think that it's important to realize that in donor walls, frequently you're looking for gifts. People are looking for ways to thank those donors, to give them a little piece of what that donor wall might be representing. And so we do a lot of commemorative tiles that might be seen as gifts for donors or celebrating anniversaries or thank yous. And back to our tile studio, I want to close out with just kind of featuring the importance of using, you know, our material and how really the tile integrates into a real construction material. We created these faceted tiles in iridescent so that throughout the day, you're really going to see different light that's reflected, and to create, I think in this one, you've got the screen on the left that's allowing light into the natural light into the working space. And so I think it's nothing to shy away from, including tile on interior, certainly, but also exterior installations. I want to thank everybody for coming today. There's a little bit of contact information there if you're inquiring about architectural tile, or you want more information about donor walls or things of that nature. I'm happy to answer questions for you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of open it up for questions. I know a number of people were asking questions as we went along. And I noticed one of them, of course, was from Miriam about your clay and your glazes. And Amanda has done a great job of answering some of these questions. But in Amanda's answer, she had responded saying that the glazes actually have changed significantly because, as you were saying, Steve, there's some harmful material in some of these older glazes. So how has that process been? And, you know, was there a time in which you had to kind of go through and change all of the glazes, or is this kind of a process that continues?
Steve, you want to answer? You want me to answer?
Yeah, I can start that. Yeah, so it's been a process. Kind of one of the things, you know, we use kind of tradition. The basic, you know, technique hasn't changed that much, but we've learned a lot more about materials and techniques. And so, you know, early on, Mary used lead in all the glazes, you know, colorants like uranium, and those would be phased out at different times. Uranium, you know, they recognized that probably wasn't a good thing to be using in glazes. Lead lasted a little bit longer. And so, you know, we've gone back and kind of recreated a lot of the kind of traditional look and feel of some of those early glazes, but using, you know, contemporary materials that are much safer. Even the processes, like the iridescent glaze, the way you get the iridescent finish is, all of our work is fired at least twice. So the first firing is raw clay to bisque, and that's about 1800 degrees. And then we glaze them and then fire them high fire to about 2300 degrees to get the glaze finish. Then for iridescent, they actually get another coating of glaze and get fired to a lower temperature. And traditionally, Mary and the pottery would inject kerosene oil into the kiln at that point while it was at temperature, and that would create a smoky atmosphere that starved the kiln of oxygen. And so the combustion would look for the oxides in the glaze, and that would bring out those iridescent finishes. So it took a while, but it hasn't really been that long. I don't remember when we switched over, but we currently use it's a combination of vegetable oil and dish soap to get a similar iridescent finish. So it's an ongoing process. I mean, we're still like, making experiments today to, as we learn more about procedures and materials, it's been something that's changed kind of along the entire history.
So we had another question about those, some of those iridescents being available. Like, could a hobby potter purchase them? But it sounds like even if you could purchase them, the process of doing that glaze is just maybe beyond what a potter at home could do.
Yeah, I mean, there's, there are commercial lusters and things that people can get. The iridescent finish is a little different and probably not something that most people want to do if they've got a kiln at home. It's hard, it is hard on the kiln itself. And so we do, replace elements pretty regularly. It's also a pretty noxious fume thing, not dangerous, but smelly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that I think could be done at home, but we wouldn't necessarily recommend it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if people have other questions, go ahead and add them in the chat. Genevieve, you had said something kind of interesting about how in the Palm House, some of those iridescents were inspired by the water. And I wonder, because we're talking about design in Detroit and, the legacy of Pewabic, how your location has influenced maybe the tile design or maybe the vessel design that you guys do. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I certainly think, with the iridescent, when I was referencing in the Palm House, the beauty of that finish is it really picks up what's around it. So you might have iridescent installed, in your fireplace, and the light, that kind of orange light and glow, suddenly makes it look quite different in your space than the space at the Palm House, which is kind of washed in natural light and blue light. So that is one of the beauties of that iridescent, is it really kind of mimics what's around it. So it's very sweet in that way. And I would say, the environment or, the city is definitely an influencer of, of our materials and even of some of our architectural lines here. We've been inspired by the names of some of the neighborhoods or some of the prominent communities. And so we're always kind of inspired, I think, by this city and by Detroit.
Yeah, I also think of, Detroit's use of like handwork. Like I always say that I love the Midwest because there's such a wonderful, sense of hard work. And I think that, doing these tile installations by hand and making, tiles by hand, it has that same kind of.
I think we inspire a lot of people, really a lot of makers and a lot of other tile makers, in this community. I joke there's an area in our retail space that's like a kind of the wall of tile makers. And when you look at those tile makers, there were people who were students here. They were people that worked here and then have gone on to kind of create their own vision of tile. So, we're not really making competitors. We're really embracing other makers to make more tile, to appreciate tile, to love tile. The more people that love tile, the better it is for us and for everyone.
So we have another question from Miriam. Given the size of your facility, are you limited in the number and the amount of projects that you can do or handle at one time?
Steve, you want me to answer that?
Sure, go ahead.
I think with the addition of the new fabrication tile studio, that really has allowed us to move forward with looking for more projects, bigger projects. We've definitely not reached any kind of capacity at this point, but the goal of having the enhanced showroom was so that we could bring in more projects and really, I always say that the tile expansion was kind of our first wave increasing kind of our space here. You know, the next wave, I think we're all hoping, is our education department. You know, they're really super deserving, and we want to make that it's a huge part of our mission. And so that's really important. But as far as tile making capacity, no, we're ready. We're ready for more work.
Great.
Although, you know, we still do, you know, there certainly it takes a while, and, you know, we're a craft studio. So we're, you know, we don't, you know, there's a kind of a limit to how many we make at one time, just because, you know, it's not fully at capacity with the kilns and things, but it's just, you know, our goal is to do the hand craftsmanship. And so, you know, there is, you know, kind of a long lead time sometimes to get into that production process.
Yeah, there's definitely a queue, you know, for delivery projects, because essentially we're turning, I joke, we're turning dirt into art. We're turning all these earthy materials, powdered materials, into these beautiful finished products. And that, of course, takes time. You know, lead time can vary from 16 weeks, maybe 12 weeks if it's something a little bit simpler, but really that's not a very big difference between any specialty product that you're going to be ordering.
Yeah, that's great. So I am going to actually go ahead and wrap up the call. It's 4 o'clock. I do want to go ahead and share, I don't know if everyone was able to catch it, but in Steve's first slide, he had a wonderful image of the tile that you make for us every year for our Masters of the Medium. So this is the award that we give to our Masters of the Medium and Distinguished Educators every craft weekend. This one is a little bit more modern of a design. We used to have it on a wood plaque that we did, but we are so thankful to work with Pewabic. And of course, we're thankful to all of you for joining us today. Genevieve, Steve, and Amanda, thank you so much for presenting. If anyone has any other questions, let us know. We can get those questions over to Pewabic. So thank you.